Chijioke sat alone on the front steps of his family's large compound in Lagos, his eyes following the street vendors as they passed by. His home stood tall and beautiful, 3 floors, shiny black gates, 2 cars parked in the driveway, but to him, it felt like a silent prison. At just 15 years old, Chijioke had everything a boy could dream of: a personal tablet, expensive clothes, even a room with a big screen TV. But none of that filled the empty space in his heart. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Obi, were always away, either at work, at meetings, or traveling to another country. They were successful bankers, and their hard work gave Chijioke a comfortable life. But comfort isn't the same as love. And what he truly missed was family. Every morning, a driver picked him up for school. Every evening, he returned to an empty house. The cook would serve his food and leave. The security man would nod and go back to his post. No one asked how his day was. No one noticed when he looked sad. And every night, he ate dinner with only the sound of the ticking clock and the hum of the fridge to keep him company. One Thursday afternoon, as he walked home from school dragging his feet, he noticed someone sweeping the flowers in the compound next door. It was Madam Iriti. She was well known in the neighborhood. A rich widow in her early 50s, always dressed in fine ankara, with gold bangles that jingled as she moved. Most people feared her. Some said she was proud. Others said she was just lonely. But Chijioke had never spoken to her before. That day, she looked up and gave him a small smile. "You always walk home alone," she said gently. "Where are your parents?" Chijioke hesitated. "They work late. Sometimes they travel." Madam Iriti nodded slowly. "And who do you talk to when you get home?" He shrugged. "Nobody." There was a pause. Then, with a warm voice, she said, "Come. Let me give you something to drink. The sun is too hot today." He looked at her carefully. She didn't seem dangerous. Her voice reminded him of his grandmother, calm, confident, and soft. He nodded and followed her through the gate. Her home was just as grand as his, but it felt different. Warm. Colorful. There was music playing softly in the background. A smell of fresh bread filled the air. She poured him cold juice and offered him coconut biscuits. "So, what do you do when you're alone?" she asked. "I read sometimes. Or just sit outside." She nodded thoughtfully. "Loneliness can be louder than noise, my dear." They talked for a while about school, books, music. And for the first time in weeks, Chijioke laughed. A real laugh. Before he left, she smiled again. "You can come and visit me anytime you want. Even if just to talk." That evening, Chijioke didn't sit on his steps like usual. He sat in his room, holding the small biscuit tin Madam Iriti had packed for him. Something felt different. Like a door had opened. He didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of something that would change everything. From that day onward, Chijioke's feet no longer dragged after school. Instead, they hurried with a quiet excitement. As soon as he got home, he dropped his bag inside and walked 2 houses down, where Madam Iriti's gate was always open, just slightly. She welcomed him with a smile every time. Not the kind of smile people wear because they feel sorry for you. No, hers was full of curiosity and warmth, like she truly wanted him there. They began with short visits. Sometimes he helped her water her garden. Other times, they watched short comedy videos on her tablet, laughing until they had tears in their eyes. On weekends, she taught him how to make special dishes, like ogbono soup with fresh fish or coconut rice with fried plantains. "You must learn to cook properly," she'd say, handing him a wooden spoon. "A man who can feed himself is a man who can't be easily controlled." Chijioke started to smile more. At school, his classmates noticed he looked neater, sharper. He smelled nice, too, thanks to the scented soap Madam Iriti gifted him just because. One day, he told her something he'd never told anyone. "I don't think my parents even know what I like," he whispered, looking down at his juice. She placed a hand on his. "Sometimes, people give their children the world, but forget to give them their presence." That sentence stayed with him. As weeks passed, their bond grew. It wasn't just food and laughter anymore, it was understanding. He talked, and she listened. He asked questions about life, and she gave answers that felt deeper than books or teachers could ever offer. She began helping him with his schoolwork. Not just maths and English, but how to speak with confidence, how to sit with posture, how to think big. "You have a sharp mind, Chijioke," she said one day. "Don't waste it." He beamed with pride. At home, things remained the same. His parents were always rushing. Always on the phone. When they were around, they'd leave cash on the table, thinking that solved everything. But they noticed something different. "You're happier," his mother said one evening while rushing to a late dinner meeting. "Yeah," he replied. "I made a new friend." "That's good," she smiled absently. "Just stay out of trouble." Trouble? No. Madame Iriti wasn't trouble. She was his peace. She was the only one who saw him, not as a child to be managed, but as a person worth knowing. One afternoon, he came in looking gloomy. A senior boy had embarrassed him in front of others at school. Madame Iriti listened carefully as he spoke, then said, "You know, there's strength in knowing who you are. Let me show you something." She led him to her bedroom and opened a large wooden chest at the corner. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Her younger self receiving awards, standing with famous people, even shaking hands with past presidents. "I was once a girl they called a nobody," she said. "Now, look." Chijioke stared in awe. "You were powerful." She smiled. "Still am. And so can you be." From that day, he saw her differently, not just as kind, but as someone great. And slowly, he began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could be great too. The rainy season had begun, but not even the stormy afternoons could stop Chijioke from visiting Madame Iriti. It had become part of his life, just like school or sleep. Her home, once a stranger's space, now felt like his second house. On one rainy Saturday, she handed him a wrapped box. "For you," she said, smiling as she sipped her tea. He unwrapped it carefully and gasped. Inside was a sleek wristwatch. Not a cheap one, this was the kind worn by top businessmen, with a shiny black strap and silver face. "I can't accept this," he said, shocked. "You can," she replied calmly. "You deserve nice things too. Look at you, smart, respectful, and honest. That's rare." Chijioke blushed. He'd never been called rare before. It wasn't just the watch. Over time, small gifts followed, books, clothes, a designer school bag. She told him, "You must look like where you're going in life. You're no longer just a boy. You're a young man." He stood taller after that. At school, the change was obvious. He walked with quiet confidence. Even his voice sounded firmer. Students who once ignored him now greeted him. Teachers praised his focus. But while the outside world saw a boy becoming a man, inside, something more complex was happening. One evening, they were watching an old African movie, one about love and betrayal. The scene grew emotional. As the characters wept on screen, Chijioke felt something stir in him. A kind of ache. Not for the story, but for the person beside him. He glanced at Madame Iriti. She looked beautiful in the soft light, her eyes fixed on the screen, her fingers gently playing with the ring on her hand. She turned and caught him staring. "What is it?" she asked softly. "Nothing," he replied quickly, looking away. But something had shifted. And both of them felt it. Later that week, While helping her arrange books in the study, his hand brushed hers. It was an accident, but neither of them moved right away. The silence that followed was thick. Heavy. She looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're growing, Chijioke. Do you feel it too?" He didn't answer. He didn't know how to. Another evening, while she helped him adjust the collar of a new shirt she bought, she paused, her fingers lingering near his neck. "You look wonderful," she said, almost to herself. Chijioke's heart thudded. It wasn't the words, it was the way she said them. He didn't understand it fully. All he knew was that he felt safe around her, seen by her, important to her. No one had ever made him feel that way. Was that not what love was? That night, as he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above, he thought about her words, her smile, her touch. "Do you feel it too?" He didn't have the answer yet. But he was starting to ask himself a new question. Was this still just friendship? Or had something else begun, something too deep for his young heart to understand? It was a Friday evening. Rain tapped gently on the windows, and thunder rumbled far in the distance. Chijioke sat on the velvet couch in Madame Iriti's living room, wearing the new grey jumper she had bought him. They were watching another film together, a slow, romantic story about two lovers who met under impossible circumstances. He didn't say much. Neither did she. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was heavy, filled with quiet emotions that had grown quietly over time. As the couple on the screen shared a kiss, Chijioke felt something stir inside him again. He glanced at Madame Iriti. Her eyes weren't on the screen anymore, they were on him. "You've changed so much," she said, her voice gentle. "Do you feel it?" He swallowed. "Sometimes." She leaned closer, and the space between them shrank. Her perfume, sweet and floral, wrapped around him like a soft blanket. "You're not a little boy anymore, Chijioke." His heart was pounding now. "I see you," she whispered. "You're strong, kind, and special." He didn't know how to reply. His lips parted, but the words never came. And then, before he could even think, she leaned in and kissed him, slow, careful, like she was afraid he might break. Chijioke froze for a second. No one had ever kissed him before. He felt the heat rush to his face. His heart thudded in his ears. But she didn't pull away. And somehow, he didn't want her to. So he kissed her back. It was soft. Strange. But not painful. It didn't feel wrong. In that moment, it felt like everything that had been building between them had finally found its voice. After the kiss, they said nothing. She turned the TV off and sat beside him quietly. The rain kept falling outside. "You don't have to be scared," she said, placing a hand on his. "Love finds people in different ways." He nodded, still too shocked to speak. His head was a mix of emotions, excitement, confusion, a strange sense of pride. He felt older somehow. From that night forward, things between them changed. The next time he visited, she greeted him with a hug that lasted a little longer. They began cooking together more often, sometimes brushing hands on purpose. She bought him a cologne that matched his energy. She even called him my sunshine now and then. Chijioke didn't tell anyone. Who would understand? To him, she wasn't doing anything wrong. She was the only person who made him feel important. She listened when he spoke. She noticed when he smiled. She remembered the little things about him, like how he liked extra pepper in his jollof rice or how he hated noisy places. With her, he didn't feel like a forgotten child. He felt like a man. One Saturday afternoon, they sat outside on her back porch, sipping zobo and watching the clouds drift by. "Do you regret anything?" she asked him. "No," he replied without thinking. You make me happy. She smiled. Then let's hold on to that. They didn't talk about labels. They didn't try to define what was happening. But both of them knew they had crossed a line. And there was no going back. Still, in their hidden corner of the world, they felt safe. For now, at least. But the world outside didn't stay quiet forever. The months rolled by, and their secret world remained hidden behind Madame Iriti's tall gates and soft curtains. Chijioke's visits became more frequent. Every afternoon after school, he would rush home, change clothes, and slip into her compound like a routine. There were no more awkward silences. No more hesitation. They cooked together, danced to soft music, played card games, and sometimes just lay on the couch, her head on his shoulder. It was their own strange version of happiness. But everything changed one evening. His parents had returned from a business trip abroad a day earlier than planned. Their driver turned into the estate just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows on the quiet street. Inside their black SUV, Mrs. Obi leaned forward and gasped. Is that Chijioke? Mr. Obi slowed down. Where? There. Look. She pointed. Ahead of them, walking side by side in front of Madame Iriti's gate, was their son, fingers gently intertwined with the older woman's. They were laughing, completely unaware of the car approaching behind them. Mr. Obi tightened his grip on the steering wheel. His face turned dark. He didn't say a word. They drove past the pair slowly, pretending not to notice, and pulled into their compound. Inside the house, a storm was brewing. That night, when Chijioke came home, still smiling from his time next door, he opened the door and froze. His parents were both waiting in the living room, arms crossed, expressions cold and tight. Sit down, his father said, his voice sharp. Chijioke hesitated. What's wrong? Where were you? His mother asked. I was just out. Don't lie, Mr. Obi snapped. Was that your friend we saw you with? Chijioke's heartbeat quickened. Yes. That was Madame Iriti. She was holding your hand, his mother said, her voice trembling. Why? Chijioke swallowed. She's my friend. She's the only one who cares. His father stood up. Care? She's a grown woman. You're a child. I'm not a child. Chijioke shouted. You don't even know me. You're never around. Who do I talk to when I feel sad? When I come home to an empty house? You think sending money is the same as being a parent? His mother covered her mouth in shock. His words were cutting. His father's face darkened. You don't get to act like parents now, Chijioke said, voice cracking. You left me alone, and she was there. She listened. She made me feel like I mattered. His father's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. What did you just say? I said we love each other, Chijioke whispered. The silence that followed was heavy. Deadly. His mother backed away, as if slapped by the words. His father clenched his fist. Go to your room. Now. Chijioke turned and stormed off, slamming the door behind him. Downstairs, his parents sat in stunned silence. Finally, Mr. Obi picked up his phone. This woman has crossed the line. The next morning, Chijioke awoke to hushed voices downstairs. He crept to the stairway and peeked down. 2 police officers stood in the living room. His parents were speaking urgently. We want her arrested, Mr. Obi said firmly. She took advantage of our son. Chijioke's blood turned cold. No, 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 no. He ran downstairs. You can't do this. She manipulated you, his mother said, tears in her eyes. One day, you'll understand. You're ruining my life, he shouted. But it was too late. By afternoon, Madame Iriti was in handcuffs. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She simply looked at Chijioke once, her eyes full of something between sorrow and pride, before she was taken away. And just like that, their secret world was shattered. News spreads fast in African neighborhoods. By the next morning, whispers filled every compound. From the meat seller to the hairdresser, everyone was talking about one thing. Did you hear what Madame Iriti did to the Obi boy? The quiet, graceful woman who once waved politely at the market women was now the center of scandal. The boy from the big yellow house with iron gates was no longer just that rich boy, he was the boy at the center of a storm. Back at the Obi household, Chijioke sat alone in his room, fist clenched, anger boiling inside him. They had taken her away. They had destroyed everything good he had left. He didn't eat. He didn't speak. He just stared at the wall, hoping she would somehow appear again. Downstairs, his parents paced the living room. Mr. Obi was making phone calls. Mrs. Obi cried in silence. But even in their fear and shame, there was guilt in their eyes. Later that evening, the knock came. It was loud. Confident. When Mr. Obi opened the door, there stood Madame Iriti. Not in handcuffs. Not in tears. But dressed in white, head held high, eyes sharp as blades. Behind her stood two lawyers, one tall and stern, the other with a tablet in hand. You thought you could break me, she said, stepping inside. But I warned you. I'm not a weak woman. Mr. Obi's jaw tightened. You took advantage of our son. And you abandoned him, she shot back. You left him alone in that big house for months. No supervision. No guidance. What did you expect to happen? He was a child, Mrs. Obi whispered, shaken. A child looking for love. A child you forgot to raise, she said firmly. Chijioke, hearing the voices, ran downstairs. You're okay? He asked, his eyes wide with relief. She nodded once, but didn't smile. Her face was serious. I came to end this, she said. You press charges, I press my own. For negligence. For emotional damage. I have evidence, photos, notes, even testimonies from neighbors who saw your son wandering alone for years. The room fell silent. You'll lose your jobs. Your names. Your respect. Mr. Obi was shaking now. He looked at his wife, then back at Madame Iriti. What do you want? He asked. Drop the case, she said. And I'll disappear from his life. Forever. No. Chijioke cried. Please. She turned to him, and for the first time, her eyes softened. You are special, Chijioke. But the world is not ready for what we shared. And maybe it wasn't right. Maybe I was wrong. His heart cracked open. I will never forget you, she said. But you must live your life. A full one. She placed something in his hand, a folded letter, then turned and walked out the door. The next day, she sold her house. She packed her things. And she was gone. No goodbye. No last smile. Just silence. The village moved on, as it always does. The gossip faded. The whispers died down. But Chijioke's heart was never the same. He sat on the same front steps every day after school, now staring at the gate that would never open again. He read the letter over and over. You reminded me that love still lives, even in forgotten hearts. Forgive me for the storm. One day, when you're grown, you'll understand why I left. Iriti. And though his world felt colder, one truth remained. He had been seen. And he had been loved. Weeks turned into months. Madame Iriti never returned. Her house was sold to a quiet family who didn't know, or didn't care, about the whispers tied to its past. But for Chijioke, the echo of her presence never left. Every corner of the neighborhood reminded him of her. The smell of roasted plantain from the vendor on the corner brought back memories of their late afternoon walks. The sight of the rose bush by her old gate reminded him of the first time she smiled at him. She was gone. But her absence felt louder than her presence ever did. At home, his parents tried to mend what had been broken. Mr. Obi cancelled some of his trips. Mrs. Obi started cooking dinner again, real food, not just ordering from restaurants. They tried talking more, asking how his day went, sitting at the table like a family. But Chijioke had grown. He wasn't the same boy anymore. He answered politely, did his chores, and kept up with school, but a part of him had sealed itself off. His mother noticed it one evening. "You're always here, but never really here," she said, watching him stare blankly at his food. "I'm trying," he replied softly. She reached out and held his hand. "So are we? Please don't shut us out." He didn't reply, but that night, for the first time in a long while, he didn't cry himself to sleep. One day, a school counselor came to visit. His parents had arranged it without telling him. At first, he refused to speak. But over time, he began to share, bit by bit. It wasn't about romance, he told the counselor. It was about being seen. The counselor nodded. And feeling like someone finally listened. "Yes," Chijioke whispered. "She made me feel alive." And just like that, healing began, not all at once, but slowly, like water dripping into a dry well. At school, he joined the press club. He discovered a love for storytelling. With each short story he wrote, he released a piece of his pain. He wrote about loneliness, hope, and healing. His teachers took notice. His stories were published in the school bulletin, then shared with other schools. One story titled, "The House Next Door," made it into a regional writing contest. He won third place. His parents came to the award ceremony. They stood proudly as he received his certificate. Afterward, his father placed a hand on his shoulder. "You turned your pain into something powerful. We are proud of you, son." Chijioke smiled for the first time in a long while. Years passed. He graduated with honors. Then went on to study psychology, hoping to help other young people who felt lost and unseen. At a youth conference one day, he stood on stage, now 22, tall and composed, wearing a crisp white shirt and that same wristwatch Madame Ariti once gave him. He shared his story, not naming names, not giving details, but speaking about a boy who felt invisible until someone took the time to notice him. When he finished, the room was silent. Then came the applause. That night, alone in his room, he opened the old letter again. The paper was worn, but the ink was still clear. "You reminded me that love still lives, even in forgotten hearts." He smiled sadly, folded it back, and placed it in a small wooden box filled with memories. He never saw her again. But he carried her lessons with him forever. Sometimes, love arrives in ways the world doesn't understand. And sometimes, the most powerful stories are the ones we live through, then let go.